I'm here with ChrisTFer during the pretty long season, mid-season summer break, and considering you're involved in World Cup stuff, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Is that time consuming? Has it been
Ye-
eating up your
It
time?
ha No, we I think because we've had to balance it with quite like a lot of Overwatch League stuff because our roster's like free Overwatch League players, so we haven't necessarily scrimmed as much as I think a lot of the other European teams. I was in Korea for the break, so it was time zone confusing if that's a correct English term. So I was up to like 4 a.m. most nights and stuff, which wasn't too fun. But in terms of the actual hours, it's been like 2 blocks a day for a few weeks, so it's been okay.
Makes sense, yeah. Okay, here's a hypothetical for you, right? Imagine one of your players was going to flush an entire Caesar salad down a toilet and you had to unplug
Okay.
it. Would you
Uh-huh.
know how to fix it?
Um, Actually, to be fair, the Spitfire house has been clogged like at an uncomprehendable level this season anyway, like almost weekly. So I actually think we have the facilities to deal with such an incident. Yeah.
Who can you call out who's the main culprit?
I don't know. I think no, maybe it's not a good thing to announce publicly, but I think sometimes it's like an anonymous, like no one owns up to it. But I think there's one culprit who keeps on. One person, it shall remain nameless, like only goes to the bathroom like once per week. So when he does go, the toilet just goes with it. You know, it's like it's too much.
I regret where this went, but no, no,
Oh,
never.
you asked.
I asked, yeah, I have nothing but myself to blame. I guess let me rephrase the question in the direction that I think you felt this was going. Are the London Spitfire going to be active in the transfer market for the mid-season?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I think we will. Yeah, be making like one or two changes. Yeah.
Okay, you probably can't talk about those at this point. Do you have?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm not sure when the interview is going to come out. I don't. I think our announcements normally drag, so probably yeah, can't confirm. But I think we're probably going to look to slim the roster slightly, and then maybe like make one or two additions.
Makes sense. Makes sense. We're looking forward to that. Now, part of that is if you're making additions, you also got to source the market, and it feels like this season, in comparison to others, is possibly the worst rookie season of all time in terms
Yeah,
of
I would say so.
the talent pool outside of Overwatch League. I guess is the metric. Seems unusually weak, especially if you're bound to visas. You know, if you're bound to wanting to have a Western roster where everyone talks English, it feels unusually weak on the chest. Is that also your experience?
Yeah, I think across the board. I think it was weird because maybe you was expect last year to be like a weak rookie class because like contenders didn't have Overwatch 2 and there was all sorts of complications. But obviously, a lot of rookies came in and pounded last year. Whereas this year, considering they've had a year to play it, like the contenders talent pool doesn't. It's getting worse and worse. I think especially the Korean contenders talent pool is obviously the one that normally like EU NA you get like one or two gems each, and then Korea like funnels like 10 billion of them in. But this year it doesn't feel like that's happened at all. I mean, I don't know if it's like necessarily like that unusual. I was thinking like CS:GO for example as a game, like that game has been pretty like cement. I mean, I don't follow the game, but like it feels like people who have existed in that game have just found a way to prolong themselves at the highest level for a long time. Like League of Legends, right? Like I think a lot of there's a lot of players that play at the top level 5, 6, yeah, maybe even more years, and players like Bjergsen and Faker and stuff, you know. Um, so it might actually just be the way that it goes is where eventually the league is just like has talent that like they find the right like level of like mechanics and then the right level of like the right mindset. And obviously if you have those two things, it's quite difficult to shake it. Um, but I think that was something that yeah we have found, and I think other teams have found that dipping into like contenders is not it's there's a very very noticeable gap there, maybe more so than previously.
Do you think this could also be the? I mean, the impact of Academy dying wasn't going to be felt immediately. Like everyone in those systems wasn't going to, just vanish. Is this now the aftershock of that event taking place?
Yeah, it could be. It's really hard to say, isn't it? I feel like when I look at like EU and NA contenders especially, I feel like a lot of the players that are playing on those teams that are good have been playing for a while. Do you know what I mean? So like it's like if like you have Overwatch League, then you have contenders. The top of contenders is still the top of contenders from when it was like 3 or 4 years ago. So it feels like there isn't necessarily that many like new names that have broken through. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say, like it's possible that like new players, like you can't just like pick, like if there's a player that starts playing Overwatch tomorrow, he can't be in the league next year. It requires years, right? So it's possible that one of the, like if you like to track like how many people are actually playing Overwatch, like it could be like at the bottom at the end of Overwatch 1 where it was at its low, that's where like the talent for this year should be. And maybe now that it's trending back up again with the Overwatch 2, that maybe in a year or two, the players that start to play at the start of Overwatch 2 could potentially like be the new rookies on the block. That could be the reason, but I'm not really sure to be fair.
I mean, that makes some sense to me because it feels like the player base probably has at least 2x. It probably more so.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know, right? But when I was in Korea, when I was like working at the PC bank, a lot of Overwatch, really, like not quite League of Legends numbers, but I was like, yeah, okay, like people are really, really playing this game. But I suspect if you go back in time 2 years to the end, like that last year of Overwatch 1 where there was no content, no patches, I bet like player numbers were at an all-time low, especially new player numbers, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, the problem also is that it's not just that we're not getting new talent in, it's also that we're experiencing that especially the West has issues developing talent, right? And one of
Yeah.
those saving graces that people point out, especially for North America, is the collegiate system. I would argue this doesn't get us out of any developmental stuff. It will fix funding maybe, but the incentive structure already is so out of whack that like the bottom tier teams with bottom tier budget are losing the value proposition, right? Again, or the value they can offer up to top talent
Yeah.
against collegiate, right? So if I'm in a collegiate program, if my league is not doing well, it's not providing the status, is not providing the monetary feedback, then my incentive structure is not to go into the Overwatch League, but to get a free ride based on my ability to play Overwatch, right?
Well, I suspect there's all sorts of wise people who would say if you've got like you said, a free ride at Collegiate, do not sacrifice it to go into the Overwatch League. I think obviously it's more fun and you've got the passion and you want to compete and like you can go for it. But I think if you're looking at from like a wise, mature perspective, yeah, maybe don't. Unless like you can get paid big, which even now it's harder to get paid big compared to what it used to be.
Right. Is it just a problem of the carrot being smaller and smaller and not really attracting, top tier talent, and they'd rather go into other games?
Yeah, potentially. I don't know how many people start playing games like originally, like with the intention of like going pro, like oh, like Overwatch, I'll get a lot of money, I'll do it. I feel that most people start playing games at the very start without like the notion of going pro and maybe for like more passion reasons. So maybe that's not a factor. Um, yeah, I think like the carrot getting smaller and stuff like it's not a yeah, it's more I'm not like a business person, but I think it's more like a realization of the reality as opposed to like the game isn't shrinking, it's just it was over hyped before and now it's maybe like more normalized compared to like the viewership and like the actual reality of what like teams can get in through like sponsors. So I think like the notion that like oh like the league is dying, like the game is dying, like look at all this, like I don't like necessarily fully buy it. I think it's just well, yeah, the league was alive when they were just pumping like more billions of dollars in, and everyone was losing all of it. And now all of a sudden, oh, if we only get 40,000 viewers on YouTube, it turns out teams can't afford to pay $2 million salaries every year. League of Legends is going through the exact same thing, right? Well, all of a sudden their viewership is higher, but every team is like, whoa, it turns out we're actually not making money. I thought everyone kind of expected that, oh, if we put in this money now, the sponsors will come. They don't come, so then the bubble shrinks.
Thing is, feels like it's mostly North American region that's having these issues, and it feels like the North American esports fans' soul is really hype bound. Like, and Valorant is doing great. Their talent is doing relatively great because the status is there. It's like,
Yeah, but is Valorant doing great? I don't know. Is Valorant any different than Overwatch League Season 1? Like, okay, it's a new game. Like, it's doing well. Like, everyone's pumping money. And are the teams profitable? Do you know that? And do you know where it's going to be in 4 years? Like, how I look at it and I see all of the same mistakes that people made with Overwatch League in terms of maybe just overvaluing it. I see it the same with Valorant. It's like, I was like, oh yeah, it's working right now. Viewership's good. Yeah, Overwatch League Season 1 viewership was pretty good, right? Like, actually, like hundreds of thousands, grand finals, like 400, 500K, like World Cup insane figures. Oh, that's a brilliant tier 1 esport. Yeah, but eventually, like, viewer fatigue comes in. I don't see any evidence that, like, Valorant is going to fix it. If, like, ultimately, League of Legends with the player base and the fan base that's have, if that isn't profitable for most teams, then what is going to be,
right?
you know? But I don't know. I don't know. I've watched like a few videos. Like I was quite into it. Like when all the striking was going on, I found it quite interesting because obviously like my livelihood depends on like how esports does in general.
Yeah.
It seems like even like South, like in Korea, like T1 and all these big teams, like they're spending like way more money, but it's like I'm not convinced it's like they're profitable. You know, like they have the scene looks more healthy, but in terms of what they have to pay and compared to what comes in, I don't know if it's like
sure.
Better.
I think the saving grace in those scenes is that slot evaluations seem to be pretty stable for the LEC. Like their buy-in costs 3x over the last time they sold something, right?
Yeah.
Like, it really feels to me that the main problem right now is the NA esports fan and getting them to buy in long term. We're having the same issues in LCS that we're having in Overwatch League. Like we are also like the league has a very similar issue. Just this week, I'd argue we lost the face of the Western Overwatch League in many ways in Dante.
Yeah.
We can only hope that this guy sticks around in terms of like creating co-streams and whatnot, right? If not, you know, like that's another face that's not attracting viewers, and that seems to be a similar issue with NA esports generally. So is that really our problem? Like the NA audiences are forever going to be after the hype. You gotta spike the dopamine with a new game, cycle through hype, and then later on.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right. I think NALCS and obviously like the NA Overwatch League. Obviously, I think Overwatch League probably had quite a nice relationship with the Chinese audience in the Chinese market, which is why this little situation with Blizzard is probably one of the most bad news that we've ever had, really. And I think if that gets fixed, then that gives like a market which presumably has a lot of viewers and a lot of like potential income from. But yeah, I think you're right. I think that it seems that I feel like just in general, like maybe like NA or just maybe like Western audiences for whatever reason don't. I've always felt like actually what's happening with esports is like streaming is killing esports. Like I think if it seems like streamers in general get more viewers than esports products, but also like if you're like, let's say you're like HyperX or you're like a sponsor of a keyboard, why sponsor Overwatch League or LCS, which presumably is going to cost a lot of money to get 50,000 viewers, where if I just go sponsor XQC or just one individual, I get the same viewership numbers. I get them to personally endorse the product, which is probably more significant. Like if I see an advert for get HyperX on like as an advert on LCS compared to if XQC is going, oh, look at this dude, it's crazy. I think there's probably like you're more likely to sell products like that. So I think in terms of sponsorships, which is presumably where leagues like ours are going to make most of their income, if I'm one of these companies, I struggle to see how you can justify sponsoring a league as opposed to sponsoring a streamer for what presumably is going to cost 4 or 5 times as much money.
Sure. And I think I'd argue like we probably have a problem keeping those types of people in our system and like having them engaged. Because like, for instance, in Valorant, you have like guys like Tarek that are content creators essentially, but they stick around, right? Like
Yeah,
ideally,
well,
the same is true.
co-streaming being the big one, right? Like
Right.
that's like I think that's the one that everybody says, and I think one step that they've made, which is quite good for both contenders and World Cup, is I think people being able to co-stream, but I also think people being able to stream their POVs is actually really interesting. I've watched more contenders this year than like the last previous years, just because I get to watch EU like contenders guys like as their POV. Like I love to watch them lose, as bad as that sounds. Like that's like the most enjoyable thing, is to see them in a tight game and then they lose. Maybe it's because I'm a horrible person or whatever it is. But I think being able to see that like emotional side is actually like way better than just watching the broadcast side of it. But then again, you don't know like how does the sponsorship, like if like Super's co-streaming the league, can we like get Overwatch League sponsors onto his stream? Like how does it work? Like presumably like what you really want, what they ultimately want, is what's the most profitable is for people to watch the main broadcast, right? I think sometimes people have this idea that as long as the number is big, then we will succeed. It's like, oh, we should just go to Twitch, forget YouTube, go to Twitch because it'll give us a bigger number. It's like, well, if the number's bigger because everyone's watching because of drops, like there has to be a way to convert the number into money. And obviously, if there's like a situation where like YouTube is giving us money, then okay, we've converted some sort of number into money. And I think that like that's the same with maybe some of the co-stream and stuff. Yeah, more people will be interested in the product, but if people watching on SuperStream, does it generate income for the league? I don't know. Like I agree. I think that co-streaming in general like would be good, but I think a lot of it, I'm just not sure if it like fixes the issues, you know?
Yeah. Now let's move to an adjacent topic that where you can actually personally contribute something towards it, and that's the content side of things. That's the gameplay side of things. I thought that you guys, when you had your extreme overperformance last year, you also provided something in terms of, showmanship to a decent degree, like, hardy flex on stage or whatever, right? Like that type of stuff. Is like I remember a Jacob Wolf tweet where he said players are boring now, and do you feel still something about, like, while it is like the reasoning I never really agreed with, because you said like they are not going through the hardship, it's not as enticing of a story. It's mostly to me that they're just like not characters, and it's probably better to just optimize and like, weigh your protein powder every morning and like optimize your intake, your sleep hours and whatever. A boring person is much more likely to be good at video games, right?
Yeah, I think the league, or just in general, it hasn't done a good job of like the more outspoken people are in Overwatch, it hasn't generated like there needs to be like an incentive. You see, like I guess Jake was one of the examples where he was very outspoken, like did a lot of good stuff, and then he built a career off of it. But I think often those type of characters, like maybe like I Will Dominate from League of Legends, he was really outspoken and he built a career off of it or whatever. Whereas that hasn't really happened in Overwatch. I think there is an argument somewhere that one of the problems with Overwatch specifically is I think the average Overwatch player and the average Overwatch fan are so different in terms of viewpoints. Like what's interesting, I think a lot of Overwatch players are very, very scared to be outspoken in this community because of how quickly people are very afraid to get cancelled, or like things to like people really don't want to be outspoken. I think even just basic trash talk, people are so soft in this community that they just get like so much abuse when they like, if you trash talk and then lose, you just get like tons of abuse, and the risk to reward ratio has never once like felt good. I think like if you look at like Call of Duty as an example, like trash talking is so common there, but the fans absolutely love it. So there is like an incentive to trash talk or to be entertaining, because for whatever reason, like the average Call of Duty fan and the average Overwatch fan are very different people. Like whatever it is, I don't know like the best way to describe it, but they are just like they have different interests. Like they're just different people, and I think that the Call of Duties, they love a toxic showman who's gonna Overwatch. They don't like that. I think 9 times out of 10.
Is that a filtering thing? Like because we kept it so safe, like that we attracted an audience that...
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know, but there is an insane like self-censorship from a lot of players. I think I know a lot of players who are terrified to like don't want to stream or don't want to like ever like no one ever wants to give an opinion, you know, because the risk to reward is, even me like dancing around this topic, I'm like, oh, if I say the wrong word here, then this interview, and then it, like, you got to be careful really. And I think like that side of things is a little bit, I think I don't know if it like, I think there was obviously other reasons too. Like I think what Jacob Bull said is like true to a degree. Like I think players in general are not like outgoing, they're a little bit insecure, they'd rather just play the game and just like chill. Like none of them really want to put themselves out there. I think there's very few players who, like, I think Poker was a great example of a player who was like, he was so mature about the way that he built from a career to streaming to this to this to this to this. Like he just did everything like right in terms of like how he built like an audience, and like he was able to like get like multiple streams of income, and was able to like obviously get to stream after Overwatch League. And he was an example of someone who was just, I just thought he was very smart. Like he understands his future. Like he's maximizing his years in the league, and he's doing everything. Whereas I think there's obviously a lot of like the vast majority of players, I'm like, do you want to stream? Nah, I can't be bothered. Just want to go. Like a lot of them would just love the idea of just, yeah, I'll just play Overwatch and then I'll just get paid. And they don't necessarily like see the bigger picture in terms of, yeah, maybe I need to stream, or maybe I need to grow like a social media presence, or I need to do that. So I think there is like an entitlement or a laziness like a lot of pro players have. Like I think to say that most pro players are degenerates when it comes to stuff like that it's an understatement probably. But yeah, like I think it's like a mixture of both, where like pro players like naturally aren't showmen, and then I don't think our scene necessarily incentivizes showmans either, if that makes sense.
Okay, let me push back a little bit, because you said like the audience is soft. If you're really just like trash talking to a degree where you probably aren't going to be fined by the league or anything like that, right? Like where you're just facing social repercussions, aren't you soft by not just taking that? You know, like just like shit talking and then taking it on the chin when people don't like it?
Yeah, maybe. I think that's true. I don't think like a lot of like, I think most Overwatch League players are very soft too. Like they can't necessarily take it. Like I think it's a combination of both. But I definitely think there is like a lot of players that I've spoken to in the past, and I'm like, well, do you want to stream or you want to do this? And like, no. It's just not worth me like putting anything out there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, like I think there is something to be said about like increasing adversity, and almost in a kayfabe way, right? In a way where it isn't meant to be serious or very serious. Like you're not arguing a serious point. You're just like, you know, having an argument for the sake of it, right? Like that's streaming in a nutshell, is arguments that these particular actors don't really care that much about, but like pretend.
So like all these streamers are having drama with this guy talking to this guy. They're all just, it's like self-interest, isn't it? It's all just like grifting, like, oh, I can't believe he said this, oh, I can't believe she said this, and they all like go back and forth, but it's just to drive engagement and viewership for themselves. Yeah.
What about the game itself? So McGravy had a tweet that came out shortly before the interview, and I wanted to pick a brain on it. Should I, just for the sake of the viewer, I'll just read it out, and then you tell me what you think about it. I'm about halfway through my second year of coaching, and I played 3 or 4 years professionally, and I feel like I can confidently say this. The only thing that has improved over the years are player mechanics. I'd even suggest that team play and creativity has gotten worse over the years. No leadership, no personality, no life. I think more teams need to lean into having fun and making this product more digestible. I don't know how to fix these problems or even where to start, but I do know Owl will continue to suffer if some life doesn't get breathed into it. I think there's 2 points. I'm not even sure how they're necessarily connected. Let's start with the first part of saying only player mechanics have gotten better. Do you agree?
I don't know. They have got better, but I don't know. I think the game itself has continued to evolve. Like I think this year especially, I think maybe that Houston and Atlanta, 2 teams this year, are probably playing at a higher level than most teams that I can remember, like since maybe season 2 Shock or season 3 Shock, something like that. Yeah, I don't know. Like I think in a lot of ways, like creativity has gotten slightly better. Maybe it's because we're like one of the slightly more creative teams. I would say like we do things like differently. We're not necessarily like slaves to the meta. But I think especially this season, I think teams have been quite happy to do their own thing. Like I think you've seen a lot of teams play D.Va when it suits them, Winston when it suits them, Ram when it suits them. Like a lot of teams are quite like happy to play Brawl, play Dive. Like I think, yeah, maybe I disagree with it. Like I think that I think the actual state of gameplay is still continuing to rise. I think maybe this year because a lot of the talent's been condensed. I think you see some genuine super teams this year, like real super teams. So yeah, maybe that bit I would slightly disagree with.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what about that second part that like more teams need to lean into the fun?
Yeah, I don't know. I know. I don't know. I think also like as it depends because I think we view everything through such a Western lens, right? And I think as the amount of like Western players goes down and down, and also just there's like less personalities and there's like less. It's harder to like root for teams like from like a Western perspective. I think as teams have maybe taken their foot off the gas in terms of social media, I think there's less content being put out than there ever was before. I think so many teams are on quite like a bare bones structure that I don't really know if you know like who has a personality on every team. I think so few players stream too that again it doesn't feel like you really like. I think if you look at season 1, I think everyone kind of knew every team and there was like so much content being put out about them. Like even on the desk now, I think you've done tweets or like had opinions similar to this where the desk itself doesn't seem to focus on players. Like it never does player interviews anymore. It never does like player spotlights. It never does anything about the personality. 9 times out of 10, it's just the desk having a funny banter moment, or it's just like talking about like the game specifically. So yeah, I don't know. Like I don't know. I feel like when I look at League of Legends, I think there is more personalities in that scene than there is in ours. I think Valorant, I don't follow it well, but I think there is quite a lot of personalities who are playing that game at a high level. I think Call of Duty, I think, is filled with personalities. So I think in terms of that, for sure, we have like less outspoken big streamers or like people like you never really see like a Twitch clip from one of the Overwatch community like going viral because he has this like crazy opinion or is like shit talking this team or whatever it is. So I think that part, I think it's definitely true that like you don't really know like if you were to say like the LA Valley maybe it's a poor example, but do you know who's their leader? Do you know who's funny? Do you know anything about any of their players? You just don't, right? I think like maybe the Toronto guys, those like American Tornado guys, were quite good at being quite outspoken, good at streaming. But apart from them, like you don't really know anyone's personalities really.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. I think there's some just like residual stuff. I just assume Paintbrush is funny. He tried something in the past, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, like the point generally is well taken. Is it a thing of incentive structures? Because I remember like in the first couple of seasons, to be fair, it always felt a little cynical in a way to circumvent, you know, like certain restrictions that this league was under in terms of the now settled salary cap. But like there were incentive structures around streaming, right? Like you had streaming hour stuff that baked into your contract. Like I hear nothing about those anymore. Do we just have bad incentives?
I think I only think like 1 or 2 teams I know have a streaming incentive structure anymore. I think almost no teams have them. I think that it's possible that at some point in the Overwatch League, teams were trying to put every resource in to maximize it, whereas it's possible that the mentality of teams and the league itself, to be fair, is more cut as much fat as humanly possible, like streamline the product as much as possible. And I guess it's harder to do both things where you like try and grow it and like get players to do more and put more content out there whilst cutting budget while trying to make it as profitable as possible. So yeah, I don't know 100%, but yeah, I think that that's my kind of feeling.
Sure. What about theoretically, right? And here's Hawk's argument that he fielded, and he said a lot of it is down to going to Overwatch 2, and it's basically a feature of 5v5 that you don't have as much variety that you can play. Like, yes, they forced a lot of D.Va. It probably is also that it wasn't actually the best, and like, you know, they just tried to make it work. while 6v6 allowed to play from a mechanical deficit, and you could overcome mechanical disadvantages, and you can no longer because it's mostly down to mechanics. Do you agree with that?
I don't know. I feel like I live in a different world to some people. Like season 2, every match we played from GOAT to 2-2-2 lock to playoffs was just a mirror matchup. There was no variety. Everyone was just playing the same thing. When we went to season 3, it was a Reinhardt meta where every team played Reinhardt. Then they brought 2-2-2 and they did not 2-2-2. What did they like? The hero ban, stupid stuff. But then there was like a double shield brig BAP meta. There was like there was almost no variety in Overwatch 1. Like I think even I think maybe the last season of Overwatch 1, season 5, I guess it would have been, where like some of the Eastern teams like Shanghai and Chengdu were trying to do like Ball Sombra Tracer stuff, and maybe some of the American teams were playing like Atlanta were playing like their Orisa comp or whatever it was. But I feel like actually Overwatch 1, I don't remember it being very diverse at all. Like I remember it just being tons of mirror matches. I think this season has been the most diverse meta we've ever had in terms of, I think you've seen teams play Rein, you've seen teams play Ram, you've seen like Ana Brig, Kiri Ana, a little bit Ana Zen, you've seen Hitscan, you've seen like I think over time, like especially the top teams, oh yeah, maybe everyone's trying to do like a lot of Sombra Tracer where possible, but I think like especially early, every team had a different like philosophy, and I felt like this season was the most, in terms of meta, the most balanced the game has been in terms of anything can kind of work. And maybe, I don't know, someone must have done the stats. Maybe I'm wrong. But I feel like we've seen like less like straight mirror matches this season than in any season before.
Right. What about, okay, let's say you had an objective truth machine, and the objective truth machine could evaluate the mechanics of each squad, okay? And it would rank them, and then you put the league table next to it. Would you see big differences there, or would it just be 1-to-1?
It would be extremely correlated, I think, yeah.
Yeah.
I think very few teams are like over or underperforming like their mechanical like ceiling or floor or whatever you want to call it, yeah.
Is that bad?
I don't know. Is it different? Is it different in football? Like, are the teams at the top mostly the best players? Like 9 times out of 10, yeah, maybe.
Do we need
like, I feel like
the ability to have a cold rainy night in Stoke where you drag it to Rein and make it muddy?
Well, that's it. Like, yeah, maybe we're the only team that does that, where we just like that's our thing, where we like do something different. Yeah, maybe. But I don't know. I don't know. I feel like if you say to me, yeah, the best players tend to win more, I'm saying, yeah, well, it seems reasonable, right? Like, probably how it should be. Think, yeah. I think that, like, I really think like we, for example, as a team, like maybe you put like wherever you put as like on your like mechanical, I think we can jump a lot of places this season, like for sure. Like I think doing similar stuff to what we were doing last year, I think it's really, really, really possible. But yeah, like I don't know. I think that I think definitely the mechanical teams are at the top, but I don't know if that's necessarily, has that ever been different? I guess that's the real question. Like, was Shock when they were winning in season 2 and 3, were they just the best mechanical team? Probably, right? Yeah. Was like Shanghai when they won in 4 the best mechanical team? Yeah, maybe, right?
Yeah.
It's just, is it not just like, was that just not always how it's been? There's always this thing too, right? Where I've always had this theory in football, and it's true in Overwatch, where it's like, if you were to rank every single player on a team and you were to give them a ranking out of 10, when a team is winning, you get the players that you had as 5, all of a sudden, oh yeah, actually he's a great player, he's an 8. And when they're losing, all of a sudden, like those players are, oh, he's a 2, he's terrible. So like I think like it's possible that some of the teams that have won in the past had players who he was an 8, he was a brilliant Lucio, he was a brilliant this. And actually the reality was he was just winning, so winning like buffs everyone. Like I think there's players on this Man City team to go into football that if they just went to another team, they would just, oh, he's actually not that good. But yeah, okay, surrounded by amazing players, they're winning every game. Like, okay, he's amazing. And I think there's definitely like truth there. Like, I don't know. I think Atlanta is like so stacked, but like maybe there's like one or two where if they went to a slight, I don't know, actually that team is like really, really good, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, but like maybe like yeah, I'm not trying to like call anyone out, but like maybe one or two on Houston too, where it's like maybe if he was dragged like a bottom 5 team, all of a sudden you don't think he's like a top 3 DPS in the league or whatever it is. So like it kind of goes both ways, right? Like the teams that are winning have the best mechanics, but they also look like they have the best mechanics because they're winning. So like it kind of, but I think also they probably are just the best mechanical teams, like especially the top 2.
My hot take is that Titans was probably the weakest mechanical team that was ever good, and the only good mechanical players on that team were probably Haksal, to a degree, also like freak of nature with his sense. I'm not sure he could ever, to have transitioned into any sort of, hitskin stuff that would have been required eventually. And Twilight, of course, is a freak of nature.
Yeah, I think that's a good shout, to be fair, because I think that's the exact thing that I'm talking about with like the Man City team, where like when all of the pieces went elsewhere, almost none of them looked good, right? Like almost all of them, yeah. So yeah, I think that's probably a good shout.
Right. Now, okay, so in terms of the diversity of meta, there's an interesting stat that I looked up about your team, okay? On Winston compositions, you have 26% win rate.
Yeah, not too good.
On your Reinhardt, the Mei composition,
yeah,
it's 61%.
Yeah,
Okay.
Now it would be higher too if we'd only played it where it's good. Like we've like forced it on Junkertown and stuff, and I think we've like ruined our win rate. But I think actually this season, our like Rein has been better than it was last year. Like when we played Rein against like the top teams last year, like the Houstons, the Shocks, the Gladiators, we could never take maps. But I think we beat Gladiators on a map. We destroyed Houston on a map, even though some people said they were trolling. I just think we just won. Who else did I think we smashed Florida on like a brawl map, so we've actually been able to compete with like the top teams on that. But obviously, unfortunately, there is other compositions required in Overwatch which we've been struggling with more so.
Right. Now, okay, if we believe that mechanics maps placement, then we probably, in order to make that fit, need to believe that mechanics are contextual to heroes, which seems to map correctly.
Yeah.
So, are you therefore currently mechanically the 11th best team in NA just because of the influx of new talent?
I don't know. It's really hard for me to say it because obviously I don't believe it. Because I'm like I can't really believe it. Honestly, I really think, and maybe this ages badly, but I think the second half of the season, like I think we will do better. And I think we will like show ourselves a little bit more. I obviously I can't deny that we are like the 11th best team because that's where we finished and stuff. But like I think we had a lot of problems, and maybe we'll get into it later, like about like some of the specifics of it. But I think this team is capable of more than it's shown so far, and I think whilst we probably won't have the season we had last year, I think this is not. I don't believe that this is our level and we just overperformed and we're back to the norm. I think we can do better than we are right now.
What's missing?
Yeah, I don't know. I think we just like I think obviously there's like a few elements in terms of like what's gone wrong this season. Like last year, I always use this phrase like you played Mario Kart presumably, right? And
Yes.
you've gone on Mario Kart, and the speed boost. It's like a little rainbow thing, and you go on it, zoom, like this. Last year, our season was just one of those Mario Kart maps where it was just speed boost after speed boost. Like we beat Vancouver on week 1. All of a sudden, that extra like confidence, that like, extra like motivation, that extra buy-in, zoom. We beat Boston, zoom. Even like that allows us to lose to like Gladiators and Houston, beat Atlanta, even though we don't qualify for Dallas, zoom. We qualify for like Hawaii, zoom. We qualify for everything. Like we keep like every time like things get tough, there was a win that like shot us up. In this season, slightly due to the format and slightly just due to the nature of things, I think we start the season 0-2, which was really rough because I really think we had to win one of those games to have a good season. Then we beat Vegas the next week, but the same way beating Vancouver on week 1 was a zoom. Beating Vegas, especially like the way that we beat Vegas, it wasn't like there was no speed boost from that. You know what I mean? And obviously, what was good about last year was you could just do like a tournament reset, and there was like more opportunities. Whereas this year, it's like, oh, you need to get top 4 to go to Korea. Like, I think it just like it's a lot harder. And I think there's this thing in football they call like second season syndrome, where it's like a team gets promoted to the Premier League and everyone expects them to go down, and they just, because like of the speed boosts and just everything's new, they just find a way to fight and they just do it and they stay up like in a miracle. But then that second season, everything like drops off, because all of a sudden, when we last season, if we won a scrim versus Toronto, for example, oh wow, we're actually beating a super team. We're really, really happy about this. This was good. This season, if we beat Toronto, well, of course, we finished 6th last year. That's what we should do. And I think, unfortunately, what ends up happening is like our expectations are like slightly too high, to the point where we can't get the same like dopamine hit or motivation hit from the things that gave us hits last year. So a lot of like the magic, or what was really like pushing us forward last year was like these external factors where, we just got a nice schedule at the times that we needed it. We just fell into good metas when we needed it. Like every time we had like a poor run, we would just get a fixture against a team that meant we could like win it, and then we could like start like the good period again. Like I think stage 4 was like maybe our worst in terms of the meta, but that stage they gave us Boston, New York, and Vegas, right? So all of a sudden we can get our way through it. And I think like there's a lot of external factors which have made it more challenging for us to have that same like belief, that same energy. Like I think scrims inevitably become more tiring. Like we used to really love scrimming a lot last season, because every time we won a scrim against any team that was like not bottom 2, we were really happy about it. As you just, even for me as a coach, it's not like I'm like, it's not like it's not even like unnatural. It's completely normal. Like it's almost impossible to do anything. But even for me, when we have a scrim where we beat a team, I'm like, yeah, but that's kind of what we should be doing, right? That's our level, and it doesn't necessarily give us the same fuel. Yeah, it's possible that the way that we like handled the off season, or like the moves that we ended up making, didn't work out the way that we'd hoped. I think last year, even though we were like a Ryan team, we were able to compete on a lot of like Winston comps. Like I think especially stage 2, we did win in a lot of like the Zen Brig or like the Zen Anna eras. Um, that's obviously just not something that we've been able to do. That's not something we've been able to figure out. And I think a good season for us is almost entirely dependent on being able to figure out a way to navigate the maps where you can't play Reinhardt, which is where like our full focus has been and continues to be.
I assume you guys would have liked to have that Junker Queen patch go through early into all, right? That would have given you a boost.
Yeah, potentially. Like I think we scrimmed a little bit on it in World Cup, and I'm not convinced Queen was ever going to be meta, even with those patches. But anytime that like a more broadly style meta is available, then be like first in line to come take it, to bite your hand off,
Makes sense, yeah. Do you presumably, I think if I remember correctly, you have a pretty easy second half of the schedule, right?
Yeah, I think I guess one of the benefits, I think the first stage we had 6 of the top 7 we had to play. So we had like a relatively tough schedule comparatively. So I think this stage, like we've gotten like an easy one. I think obviously like the format this year isn't great, at least from like a competitive standpoint, but I think we're like maybe one of the beneficiaries of like the way that they've done the second half, where if you perform badly, you get easier games, and if you've performed well, you get tougher games.
Which team are you doubling up on? Do you remember?
We have 2 Houston, we have 2 Gladiators, 2 Valiant, 2 Vegas. So
Oh, okay.
like it's like I think like I don't think it's perfect, because I think that like if you have a tough first half of the season, it's like without even like doing anything to the schedule, you should have a slightly easier one in the second. I think maybe where it's like a little bit unfair is like a team like Toronto, who actually had the easiest schedule in stage 1, but still finished badly, get an easy schedule in stage 2 because they did badly in stage 1. So that feels like a little bit unfair to us, because like in our head we're like, well, if we had their schedule, we think we would be like ahead of them, you know what I mean? Because obviously we beat them, and I'm not saying that we're like better than them, but I think that if we had got Valiant and Vegas and New York and Toronto like they did, like maybe we could have done slightly better. But I think the second you do a system where you don't play everybody the same amount of times, what a surprise that there's going to be problems. Like,
Yeah.
who could have predicted it?
Are you concerned about Vegas' new recruits and them upgrading significantly because of it?
I don't know. I think it's such a tough ask, really, isn't it? Like 200 ping. Presumably, those guys don't speak any English. I don't think they're going to get like a team house. They're going to have to be up till 4 a.m. I think if they don't start strong and they continue to lose scrims, I think it's such a tough position to be in, really. Like if they had a team house and they had like a permanent translator and whatever, yeah, okay, yeah, I think the team can do a lot better. But I think in those circumstances, it could be better, but I can't see it being like too much better. You know, I think it looks really, really tough. If they do a lot better, like fair play to all of them. Like that's like a pretty incredible story.
Presumably, you were in that exact position during the Fusion year, right? Like where you were playing on ping in a time zone that wasn't yours, right?
Well, yeah. Well, what we did on Fusion was we just signed Korean players until
Right.
we could get the visas out there. So we got like Toby and Hotber, and we're just able to run like a fully Korean team because yeah, the idea of playing on ping and on time zones, it's
Right.
you
Yeah,
can't do it.
I recall that, but like you initially probably scrimmed, tried to make it work, and then realized it can't.
It was yeah, we did like the start of the season we tried, but it's just I mean yeah, even on like World Cup stuff, like we've got some guys who are in LA, so they're playing on like EU, and it's just so hard. Like the game on ping is just soul destroying. Really, is like the best way to describe it.
Right. It feels to me a little bit like, just in terms of like the resources and everything, that Justice is having the year that you guys had last year. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, I would say so. I think they were one of the teams where I looked at that roster build and I thought that's a really tough job. Like mixing Korean players with like European players. But you got to like you can't really say anything except like fair play to get them. Is like they have done like very well. I think like AlphaYi's actually had like an MVP level season. Like that guy's actually incredible. So the fact that they've signed him is like the best or like the worst. That guy would upgrade so many teams ahead of them. Like he's really, 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 really good. I think just this season, based off like what I've seen in officials and scrims, I think he's actually been the best player in the league this year. Like I think if I really think like just because of like I'm not like shit talking the players around him, but I think if you take him out, that team drops like so far. Like I think he's really, really good. Whereas obviously like Lip Violet, they've had like amazing seasons, but yeah, they're also very, very comfortable with the players they have around them. Whereas like when we scrim Washington, it's like, oh yeah, I pressed tab. Oh yeah, Alfie's got 20 kills, 0 deaths again. Oh, that's cool. Like the guy's really, really incredible.
It feels like very often when I talk to, especially like general managers or coaches, it's always like after the call, it's like, AlphaYi is crazy. Like I can't believe he landed with Justice. You could have recruited him. Like it's not like they outbid you, right?
Well, no. I mean, like, yeah, even me. Like, I mean, we're a Western team. We're going to stay Western, but then there's a part of me who's like, I could have just signed AlphaYi. We're going to be like, Papa, why didn't I just go like Korean? You know? Yeah. Like I think yeah, he was because I think last year he was good too. Like I think. I think some people said like, oh, he was insane last year, and people just didn't realize. I think he is better this year. I really think he's better this year. But he was also really solid last year. Like across a lot of metas, he looked really, really, really good. So yeah, I don't know. Like there has to be some teams which are like, yeah, we probably should have got him upon hindsight.
I feel like we're having a lot of revisionist takes in terms of like how APAC and NA matched up historically. Like I'm totally on board saying like NA is clearly the better region this year. It's less obvious to me in previous years. How do you match it? Like ever since the separation, like are you team NA, train NA, or like do you think during certain periods APAC was a better region?
I think season 4 where Shanghai won the league, and I thought it was going to be like a Shanghai because obviously we were in APAC then, so maybe it's like wherever I am is the better region. Maybe that's just what it is. But I think Shanghai and Chengdu, I thought were going to be the top 2 teams because I thought they were playing at like a really, really high level. And obviously, when Shanghai won, I think APAC was pretty strong that year. I think last year NA has to have been better. I think that like Spark were the only team that went like top 4. because it was like Dallas, Shock, Houston. I think season 3 was also a separated year, but I think, yeah, I mean, I think Seoul and Shanghai were pretty good that year, but like in my head, I think Fusion and Shock, we were slightly better than them. But I think it was competitive in Overwatch 1, and I think less so in Overwatch 2. And this year, I think, is like the biggest gap ever by far.
Right. Now, looking a little bit ahead of like the challenges coming up, like what is the goal? Like what is the score for the second half that you guys would be happy with?
Yeah, so I think obviously we have like 2 Valiant games and 1 Vegas game. So I think for us, we really need to win those 3. And then we have Atlanta and Houston. So yeah, we probably can lose those. And I think we have 3 games against Gladiators, Shock, and New York. And I think those 3 will be the ones that like we're aiming for top 10 because we just want to make it into play-ins and then just see what happens. So I think we probably realistically need to take one of those 3. 2 would be really nice. So I think anything from 4 to 4 upwards, I think would be a good stage for us, and I think would probably set us up to make the play-ins, and then we can see what happens.
Do you need help from the meta for that?
I don't know. Like, I don't know. I honestly think that like the Winston comps, I think we got so like, a lot of it was my fault. I think maybe like I should have. Maybe I was like too stubborn to like. I don't know. Like, I don't know. I feel like I could have done so much better last stage in terms of like just realizing like the predicament we were in on some of those maps. Like every time we went to Blizzard World, I think there was like this feeling we're just going to lose to no matter who it is. I think that I had to have done something different to change it, to shake it up before I did. Like even towards the end against Toronto, we just had like, screw it, we'll just play Lucio, Kiri, like Winston, Sombra, Tracer, and we'll play something a little bit more bread and butter, and we actually won that map. But I don't know. I really look at the team and I think, I don't think, like, I think, okay, will we ever beat Winston, Sombra, Tracer against Atlanta and Houston? Yeah, maybe not. But when I look at like those like 2 or 3 teams that are slightly ahead of us, like the Toronto, Vancouver, New York, maybe Shark, I think we can beat them on Winston Mirrors. I really, really, really don't think we're like so far gone. I think, yeah, we will maybe change the lineup a little bit. Like, I think what's nice now is like when you're in the season and when you're behind the meta, it feels really difficult to dedicate a lot of time to fixing it because you don't know if it doesn't work. Like, our game's in 3 days, so yeah, we'll just learn Sombra Tracer in 3 days. But now we've got like 2 and a bit weeks until our first game, so we can really sit down and like attempt to play the meta like with a little bit less pressure. Maybe we've had a break, so we can kind of get like a little like reset, like a honeymoon period. Like I really think that we will. I think we have to be, but I really think that we can be better at those comps this stage than we were the last. Almost impossible to be worst, I suppose.
In your experience, has the meta changed at all through the introduction of the new patch?
A lot of teams haven't started scrimming yet, but I think most people have looked at the patch changes and said it's going to be the same. Like, I think the Cassidy changes are interesting, but I think he also just feels very, very difficult to play in a Winston-based comp. So I don't know if the main buffs are buffs or nerfs. I have a slight feeling they're slight nerfs, actually. But I think that overall the Rein comp has gotten a buff, which is good for us. But I don't think it's gotten a buff to the point where if we play Hollywood, we're going to be able to play Rein there. You know, like I think the comp itself is still flawed on a lot of like map geometry. So I think unless they do something to change Sombra, which it maybe looks like they won't, I think most teams are going to roll in with a similar idea of the meta than what they ended stage 1 with.
Sure. Now, last question. Let's end on a potential. I mean, maybe it's not, but on a potentially somber note. Like, Dante retired, and in his retirement, he said like the contrast between like playing in season 1 and season 6 is pretty stark. And you've been around since then, right? Like you've gone through all, like you've been in mega mansions, and you know you've gotten to travel for tournaments and whatnot. And we're now in season 6. I guess a 2-part question: is it still fun enough, and how do you feel about the future going forward?
For me, I'm maybe just because I've just started head coaching, I'm like enjoying this job more now than I ever have. Like like I think for me, I don't like. I think as long as like there's a job for me, as long as someone wants me within the league, I think I'm really, really enjoying this job. Like I think where I always try to keep the perspective of just okay, yeah, maybe it's not what it was, but it's still a better job than 9/10 of the population get. I still get. I genuinely get to like have a passion project as my job full time. So I don't know. From me personally, I think the same for a lot of people on this team. I think we really enjoy this job still. I think we haven't got to that stage where it's like burnt us out, and I don't ever like comparison is the thief of joy. You know, I don't really like look at like the times in season. I don't. Honestly, I'm not convinced season 2 I was happier than I am now. Really, like I think there was like all of the mansions and the travel and stuff. It's all okay, but I think normally it's just who you're on a team with and how the team is performing, which is where you get most of your happiness from. So for me personally, I'm really enjoying my work still. Yeah, I don't know. I think that it depends on like what the league needs to do, and this is what I've felt like Overwatch for a few years, where I think if you constantly say, "Oh, well, Overwatch compared to League of Legends or Valorant is like it's dead," if you think of it like that, then it's pointless. All it needs to do is like, do you ever watch golf and you say, oh, well, no one watches golf compared to football. What a shit sport. Like, why does anyone watch golf? Lol. Like, no, you just, if you enjoy golf, you watch golf. And I think like, that's what we need to do. I think we need to find like, it just needs to be semi-sustainable, right? Where like, there is an amount of people who are interested in Overwatch League and there is an amount of people that watch it. And that generates a certain amount of income. And just our salaries and like the way the league is structured just needs to reflect that to a point where it's just sustainable. It doesn't have to like it doesn't have to be the biggest esport. It just has to work for what it is, you know. And I think that like every time, like in Cloud9 here, like we live on the same street as like the League of Legends team and the Valorant team, so we bump into all of them. And it's like, yeah, if we go, oh yeah, you know, the League of Legends guys get this, you know, they get paid this, get this. Like if we think of it like that, then it's like it's so pointless, you know. All Overwatch has to do is just figure out a way to be like as close to profitable as possible. And obviously, if it ever gets to profitable, even if it's not making millions and millions, if it does end up finding a way to be like profitable or semi-profitable, there's nothing wrong with being like a tier 2 esport. You know what I mean? Like they can't all be tier 1 esports. And I think it's clear that there is like fundamental problems either with like the product or just like maybe like Overwatch is just too difficult a game to watch to ever be a tier 1 esport. That might just be the biggest problem. That like that's the thing. Like my dad says it to me. Like everyone that you speak to says, "Oh, when I watch Overwatch, I just don't have a clue what's going on. It's just too chaotic." And that might just be something that like never allows it. Like one thing you can always say about CS:GO and League of Legends is even if you've never played the games, you know what's happening. It's just a very simple game to watch, right? So like the viewership experience itself is better. But I think we just need to like stop thinking about it like growing and start to think about can we just realize like our actual place within the market and find a way to make it work and be happy with it, you know? I know as a head coach from Overwatch League team, I'm never going to make 6 figures, 7 figures, whatever it is. It's never going to happen. But if I can earn a living doing this job, that's all that needs to happen, you know. And I think if the league has to slim down or change the way that it works in order for it to be slightly like more profitable or more realistic, even if it means salaries get cut or this gets cut or like it ends up like we only get 1 LAN a year or like it all goes online, whatever it is, to me, I think it's okay. Like I don't think we need to like. I feel like it's such an American approach to life that you need to be better. You need to do the best. You need to be the biggest. We just need to be fine. It just needs to work. Like it doesn't have to be the biggest. It doesn't have to be the best. It doesn't have, we don't have to kill League of Legends to succeed. Just like find a way to make it work within the parameters. You know.
To me, there is a strong undertone of wanting this to be stable first and foremost. Do you feel a certain insecurity about the future?
Yeah, I think it's when I talk to my mum every off season, she's like, "Oh, it's all crazy." Like I'll get on a phone call and it's like, and she's like, "How?" Oh, so like I think the classic one was the after season 3. What we'd have one call with Fusion. We're going to America. Oh, we're living in Korea. We're going to America. We're doing this. Like, oh my god, like my life is changing every week, and I think this off season feels like it's going to be one of those like my contract's up here. I don't know. I think this year might be the one where they change the league structure the most. I literally have no idea, but like that's like the feeling that I get. So maybe this becomes one of those like super turbulent off seasons again. But I agree with you. I think that if you said to me like, what's your one goal for Overwatch League? It's not for it to grow. It's not for my salary to go up. It's not for any of this. It's just for it to be a stable job to the point where I know if I keep doing a good job, I can keep having a job. You know what I mean? And I think that's it. Like most people, when they're working their normal like 9 to 5s, they're not hoping, oh, I hope my company grows into a multi-billion-dollar industry and I get like a massive pay rise. No, you just want to keep having a job and like for it to keep being the same. So I think for us, I think like the earlier we find out how the league is structured next year or whatever it is, the better. But I think for us, it's just we're very privileged to be able to do what we do. So I think the longer that we can keep doing what we do, the longer we can continue to be privileged and happy.
Sweet. On that note, we wish you the best of luck in the preparation for the second half of the season. You have high goals, and thank you for the interview.
Thank you.